Welcome to conference this week. We are, some of you don't know this, but we're back in the Shala. We were in a beautiful garden last week, and I was dressed in white. We were surprised, everybody. But I'm back in black, back in the Shala. And I absolutely love the teachings for this week, and I'm going to do my best to give you what I gave everyone on Sunday in 30 minutes in a shorter amount of time. I believe this book has gifts for all of us, and this teaching is powerful, and it being brought into our daily lives in 2018. Two of the most powerful takeaway gifts for me are this week. And so on Sunday I read a lot of the book, and I want to ask the YouTube family to read from page 36 to 40, because I can't read it, I don't have enough time, but if you could please read those pages, they're incredibly powerful, and spend some time to sit with it. So the main theme of what we're going to talk about that starts on page 36 is, Viktor Frankl says, in spite of all the enforced physical and mental primitiveness of the life in a concentration camp, it was possible for spiritual life to deepen. And that's what he gives us with these two main pieces today. And one is that, he talks about that there were these, hardy, robust people that you'd think would do well in the situation that don't fare as well as the people that are a little more sensitive and their constitution doesn't seem as strong. But he felt like through watching the different prisoners and himself, the reason that the people did well, okay, was because they had this deep well that we talked about last week, which was connection with others and with nature and with art and with poetry. And so this piece begins with him describing a morning when he was marching out, early morning in the cold, and he's marching next to another man, and the man says to him, "If our wives could see us now, I do hope they are better off in their camps and don't know what is happening to us." And then I'd just like to read you this next piece. I feel like is one of the most powerful pieces from this book. That brought our thoughts of our own wives to mind. And as we stumbled on for miles, slipping on icy spots, supported each other time and time again, dragging one another up and onward. Nothing was said, but we both knew each of us was thinking about his wife. Occasionally, I looked at the sky where the stars were fading and the pink light of the morning was beginning to spread behind a dark bank of clouds, but my mind clung to my wife's image, imagining it with an uncanny acuteness. I heard her answering me, saw her smile, her frank and encouraging look. Real or not, her look was then more luminous than the sun which was beginning to rise. A thought transfixed me. For the first time in my life, I saw the truth as it is set into song by so many poets, proclaimed as a final wisdom by so many thinkers. The truth that love is the ultimate and the highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in the world still may know bliss, be it only for a moment, in the contemplation of his beloved, in a possession of utter desolation, when the man cannot express himself in positive action, when his only achievement may consist in enduring his sufferings in the right way, in an honorable way. In such a position man can, through loving contemplation of the image he carries of his beloved, achieve fulfillment. For the first time in my life, I was able to understand the meaning of the words, "The angels are lost in perpetual contemplation of the infinite glory." As he continues on, this is difficult. He talks about when some of the prisoners were being beat, when they fell on the ice, and then he talks about There was no need for me to know. Nothing could touch the strength of my love, my thoughts, and the image of my beloved. Had I known then that my wife was dead, I think that I would still have given myself, undisturbed by the knowledge, to the contemplation of her image, and that my mental conversation with her would have been just as vivid and just as satisfying. Set me like a seal upon my heart, love is stronger than death. And so in this piece, he describes not knowing whether or not she's alive, but saying that that wouldn't have changed how just talking to her. And in some of the writing I'm not going to read, he just talks about in his mind he would see her and he would ask her questions and she would answer, and she would ask him questions and he would answer, and found that not knowing whether or not she was alive or dead still kept him going through all this. The other piece that was really beautiful, and I won't read all of it, but he talked about how nature and the connecting to nature was one of the things that he felt like helped them all survive through this. And he describes a situation, a time when they were going from one concentration camp to another on a train, and in the cars they had these bars, and they could look through the windows through the bars and saw the beautiful mountain range, and how it took their breath away and filled, would say like it filled their cup. And now we'll read you this paragraph here, and I always get choked up when I read it, so bear with me. In Camp 2, a man might draw the attention of a comrade working next to him to a nice view of a setting, shining sun through the tall trees of the Bavarian woods. One evening, when we were already resting on the floor of our hut, dead tired, soup bowls in hand, a fellow prisoner rushed in and asked us to run out to the assembly grounds and see the wonderful sunset. Standing outside, we saw sinister clouds glowing in the west, and the whole sky alive with the clouds of ever-changing shapes of colors, from the steel blue to blood red. The desolate gray mud huts provided a sharp contrast, while the puddles of the muddy ground reflected the glowing sky. Then, after a minute of moving silence, one prisoner said to another, "How beautiful life could be." So the two gifts that I feel in these teachings for us is the power of love, even after death, which I can personally attest to, and also the power of nature, the power of that connection that we have as human beings to the infinite, or to our own soul through that connection. And I remember I was reading this last Saturday night last week, and last Saturday afternoon actually, and I would read it and sit with it for a moment and read it a little bit more, and I got a little bit teary when I was reading it, but just sitting with that, what the feeling that it invokes. And later that early evening, I was walking around the neighborhood and I stumbled upon a neighbor who was so happy to see me to complain to me about her husband. She was so mad at him. And he had just done all the wrong things for her birthday. It was a big birthday, and he got her the cake, and she didn't want the cake, and and he did this and he did that, and it was just all the wrong things in it. Now, 2 days had already passed, and she was still mad at him about this. And I know him, and I'm thinking, oh man, I can see how he tried to do all the right things, but I could see it. It's like they missed each other, like in her wanting and his doing, like somehow there was this missing. And I found myself wanting to, because I just read this, and I found myself wanting to get in the passenger seat of her car and say, just sit for a second, I'm going to read you something, But I knew how incredibly socially inappropriate that would be. So instead, I listened to her and I just said, I get it. I've been there. I've been there so many times where I was just so mad, at Richard, or he wanted this and I wanted that, and we were just missing each other. But I could say to her, because she knew him, to say, like, you know what? Don't hold on to it. Because this love you have is a gift, and life is so precious, and loving is so precious. And I just said, be mad about the cake then let it go. This was my great profound advice for the day, but I thought about it, you know, and I've been thinking about it ever since, that so often the people we love the most, like our children or our best friends, or certainly our partners, right? They are the ones that really somehow challenge something within us that it is always like, you're just not doing it right, you know, you're not loving me right. So I think it's just a beautiful message for us to take. This was written in 1949, a man who's surviving a concentration camp, to say, but it's the power of love, and how are we today showing up and loving the ones that we love is, I think, a great takeaway. For me, I want to share with you. And then the bit about the prisoners, that I just imagine them so tired emotionally and tired physically, and holding this bowl of soup that was probably a sad excuse for a bowl of soup, and being so hungry. And someone saying, the sun is setting and it's beautiful. And I immediately hoped that I could be that person that in the midst of suffering, in the midst of something so hard, that I could notice the sunset and want to share it with everybody else. And then I also had this thought of like, I hope that I could also be the person who was holding the soup and just so tired and still put the soup down and go out to see the sunset and say how beautiful life could be. And I've been thinking about that since, you know, and remembering a time when Richard was in the process of passing, and I didn't leave his side except for when his sisters would come. They loved him so much and care for him, so I could take a walk outside on our hill with the dogs, and I just remember a time walking up on the hillside and seeing a road runner with their amazing little hats on their head, and just being so filled. It filled me, you know, and my cup was pretty empty, but it filled me. And I remember going back and being so excited to tell them about this road runner that I'd seen. And so I have two things to share with you about this. I feel like nature, and this example says two things to us. One is that it can be medicine. It was medicine for the prisoners. It was medicine for them to see a sunset, for them to appreciate a tree. There are other examples. It filled their cups that were empty, you know. And I feel like, but we have to sometimes put something down to go and take the medicine in. And that's the trick in our busy, crazy lives. Sometimes we don't put the soup down to go and see the sunset. And so to me, that was such a beautiful reminder to put it down and go to nature. But the other piece for me is that it was very diagnostic, if you will. That even for me being up on to allow myself to leave him for a short amount of time to go be out in nature and to be excited about a road runner, told me that I was okay. It told me that my soul was okay. And I think for these men in prison, there must have been some similar thing for them as well. Like, they were beaten emotionally and physically, and yet they must have known when they saw the sunset, and they were all like, God, this is beautiful. There must have been something inside them that said, I'm okay. So I am so grateful to be reading this book with all of you, and we're each maybe getting something a little bit different out of the things that we read, and I hope that you're sharing this with someone else. I'm grateful to share what I'm getting out of this with you. And the quote for this week was the bit about love, of course, which is on our website, and one of our beautiful students, it's a couple who have survived cancer together, have shared their personal story about how these words have touched them. But I I just find myself in this beautiful state of contemplation and perhaps a little bit feeling of the beauty of these thoughts that are existential, of just like flipping things around and really just being wide and open right now to just pay attention to just little things in my life that I have maybe a slightly different perspective on, or just feelings that come up or whatnot in this time that we're reading this book together. So, as always, I end this beautiful, powerful teaching by saying to all of you, thank you, gratitude, and also by saying, I hope that this short time that we are here together, this short time we read our book, touches the other 22 hours of our lives and the way we do life. Namaste.